I don't know if the sky was truly that blue back then, or if an old man's memory just paints over the gray parts with something brighter to make the loss bearable. But in my mind, the sky over the fields near Kursk is always a piercing, impossible azure, vast enough to swallow a man's soul and give it back cleansed. It smells of turned earth, that heavy, black sweetness of the Oriole soil when the plowshare first slices it open in the spring. My hands remember that soil better than they remember the faces of my children. It was cool, crumbling, alive. But that memory is a lie, or at least a ghost, because the reality, the only reality that mattered in the spring of 1945, was the smell of heated diesel, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of stale fear. We were packed inside the steel belly of the T-34 like sardines in a tin that had been left out in the sun. The air inside didn't move. It just vibrated. The V2 diesel engine behind the bulkhead didn't hum. It groaned, a low-frequency thrashing that settled into the marrow of your bones and stayed there for 40 years. I was 22, but my knees already ached like my grandfather's. I sat hunched in the bow gunner's seat, though my true place, my spiritual place, was crawling over the transmission in the rear, nursing the beast to keep it moving. I looked at my hands. They were stained permanently black. The grease worked so deep into the whorls of my fingertips that no amount of sand scrubbing could lift it. These were not the hands of a soldier. They were the hands of a farmer who had been given a wrench instead of a scythe. In the village, before the Germans came, before the fire, I fixed tractors. The logic was the same. I told myself, a piston is a piston, a gear is a gear. But a tractor doesn't scream when it dies. A tractor doesn't cook you from the inside out. That was the fear. It wasn't the bullet with my name on it, or the shell splinter that would take my leg. It was the fire. We all knew it, though nobody spoke of it. We called our tanks coffins for 7 brothers, joking to keep the bile down. But I had seen what happened when the ammunition cooked off. I had watched a hatch get stuck on a burning KV-1 once. Just for a moment, the man inside was pounding on the steel, a frantic, rhythmic drumming that grew faster and faster until the flames roared up through the turret ring and the drumming stopped. I still hear that drumming when the house is quiet at night. The tank idled, shaking violently. We were parked in a defilade beneath the Seelow heights, waiting, always waiting. The waiting was worse than the dying. It gave you time to think, and thinking was the enemy. I closed my eyes and tried to summon the farm. I tried to feel the vibration of the old Kharkov tractor, the way it shuddered when the plow hit a rock. That was a good shake. It meant work. It meant bread. The shaking of this tank meant only that the clutch release bearing was rattling again. My eyes snapped open. The sound was wrong. Amidst the cacophony of the idling engine, a distinct high-pitched chattering gnawed at my ear. It was the linkage on the main clutch. I knew it. The factory tolerances were garbage this late in the war. They were pushing these machines out before the paint was dry, welded by children and grandmothers who were starving to death. Dmitri, the commander, grunted from the turret. He didn't look down. He was staring through his periscope, watching the smoke on the ridge. "Stop fidgeting. She's rattling, Comrade Lieutenant," I said, my voice sounding tinny in the intercom. "The clutch linkage. If it snaps when we try to climb the gradient, we're dead in the water. Well, then fix it. You have 2 minutes before the artillery lifts." I didn't need 2 minutes. I unbuckled, sliding off the seat and contorting my body into the cramped space beneath the glacis plate. It was dark down there, smelling of wet boots and oil. I felt for the linkage rod. It was vibrating like a guitar string. The cotter pin was gone, sheared off by the vibration. If that rod slipped, we wouldn't shift gears. We'd be a 28-ton paperweight in the middle of a shooting gallery. I didn't have a spare pin. We didn't have spare anything. I dug into my tunic pocket and pulled out a piece of baling wire I'd scavenged from a fence post 3 villages back. A farmer never throws away good wire. Working by feel, guided only by the mental map of the machine I held in my head, I threaded the wire through the hole and twisted it tight with my pliers. The chattering stopped. It was a crude fix. My father would have boxed my ears for such sloppy work on the thresher. But this wasn't a thresher. It was a disposable hammer meant to smash the gates of Berlin. I scrambled back into my seat just as the world outside changed. The rhythmic thumping of our artillery, which had been a constant background pressure on our eardrums for an hour, suddenly ceased. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with violence. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm on the steppe, when the birds stop singing and the wheat stands perfectly still. "Driver, advance," the commander's voice cracked over the headset, distorted by static. "For the motherland." Forward, the driver stomped the pedal. The T-34 lurched, the tracks biting into the soft mud with a violent jerk that slammed my head back against the padding. We surged up out of the defilade. I pressed my face to the vision slit. The glass block was scratched and yellowed, distorting the world into a murky nightmare. But I could see enough. The Seelow heights rose ahead of us, a churned, muddy slope that looked less like a hill and more like an open sore on the face of the earth. The ground was already littered with the burning husks of the first wave. Black smoke columns stood like pillars holding up the gray sky. Tracers floated toward us, lazy arcs of green light that looked harmless until they snapped past. We were moving. There was no going back to the farm now. The transition from the waiting to the fighting wasn't gradual. It was instant, like falling through ice. One moment we were a crew of men breathing and thinking. The next we were components of a machine fighting for its life in a universe of noise. The engine roared, straining against the incline. I watched the terrain through the slit, but I didn't see enemy soldiers. I saw the land, and the land was wrong. My farmer's eyes, trained to spot drainage issues and soil density, now scanned for death. That dip in the ground to the left, that wasn't a natural gully. It was a hull-down position for a panzer. The soft, dark patch of earth ahead, that wasn't rich loam. It was a minefield where the dirt had been disturbed. "Right, bear right," I shouted into the mic, overriding protocol. "The mud is too deep in the center." The driver didn't argue. He hauled the lever back and the tank slewed sideways, tracks churning up fountains of wet earth. We bypassed a crater that would have swallowed us whole. In the fields, you steer to avoid damaging the crop. Here, you steer to avoid becoming part of the soil. Then the bell rang. That's what it felt like. Not an explosion, but a colossal, soul-shattering impact that turned the air inside the turret to solid pressure. A German shell, likely a 75, had struck the glacis plate at an angle. It didn't penetrate, the sloped armor did its job, deflecting the round into the sky, but the kinetic energy hit us like the fist of God. My vision went white. Dust and flakes of white paint exploded from the interior walls, blinding us. My ears didn't ring. They simply shut off, leaving me in a terrifying, muffled silence. I could feel the tank shuddering, sliding backward in the mud. I shook my head, trying to clear the cobwebs. The smell of ozone and hot steel was overpowering. Through the ringing, I heard the commander screaming names, checking if we were alive. We were, but we weren't alone. Through the vision block, I saw the tank to our left. Number 402. It hadn't been so lucky. It had taken a hit to the flank. A jet of flame, bright and angry as a blowtorch, was spewing from the engine deck. The crew was bailing out. I saw the gunner tumble from the hatch, his uniform smoking. He hit the mud and didn't get up. My stomach twisted. That was the fear. The metal box becoming an oven. "Driver, get us moving. We're a sitting duck." The commander's voice was high, bordering on panic. The engine revved, a high-pitched whine, but we didn't move forward. The tank spun violently to the right, digging itself deeper into the mire. "Track," the driver screamed. "We've thrown the left track." We were immobilized. On the slope of the Seelow heights. In the open. "Volkov, get out there." The commander kicked the back of my seat. "Fix it. We cover you." This was the test. This was why I was here. Not to shoot, but to fix. I popped the hatch. The noise of the battle hit me like a physical blow. The sharp crack of high-velocity rounds, the ripping sound of machine guns, the dull thud of mortars. It was a cacophony of industrial murder. I vaulted out of the hull and slid down the muddy armor to the ground. The air was cold, but I was sweating profusely. I hit the mud, sinking up to my ankles. The left track had broken a link and spooled off the drive sprocket, lying in the dirt like a dead snake. I grabbed the sledgehammer and the crowbar from the fender storage. Bullets hissed through the air above me, snapping as they broke the sound barrier. I didn't look up. I couldn't look up. If I looked at the tracers, I would freeze. I had to look at the machine. I focused on the track pin. It was a simple mechanism, just like the tread on the combine harvester back home, only heavier, much heavier. Covering fire, the turret machine gun chattered above me, brass casings raining down onto my helmet, hot and stinging. I jammed the crowbar into the track links, straining with every ounce of strength my malnutritioned body possessed. My boots slipped in the blood-slicked mud. I grunted, heaving the heavy steel plates back toward the sprocket. It was impossible. It was too heavy. I told myself. I found a rhythm, ignoring the mortars walking closer up the hill. Heave, slide, hammer, heave, slide, hammer. My knuckles were blading, skinned against the raw steel. The mud coated my eyes, my mouth. It tasted of iron. With a final agonizing shove, I aligned the links. I swung the sledgehammer, striking the pin. Once, twice, it seeded with a dull clank. Tension, I screamed, waving my arms though I knew they couldn't hear me. I scrambled up the side of the tank, exposing myself to the full fury of the German lines, and dove back into the hatch just as a mortar shell erupted where I had been standing. I collapsed into my seat, gasping for air, my chest heaving. Go, go, the tank lurched. Both tracks bit. We crawled forward past the burning wreck of 402, past the bodies in the mud, and crested the ridge. Below us, the landscape changed. The open killing fields of the heights gave way to the jagged silhouette of the suburbs. It wasn't fields anymore. It was a maze of shattered brick, collapsed roofs, and narrow streets choked with rubble. The commander's voice came over the intercom, no longer panicked but grim, hollow. A voice that had seen too much. "Button up tight, boys," he said, the static hissing around his words. "The easy part is over. This is not a battlefield anymore. It's a meat grinder. Every window is a gun." We rolled into the stone gullet of Berlin, and the sky vanished. The open steppe, where a man could see the weather coming for 3 days, was a memory. Here the horizon was the 3rd floor of a burning apartment block. The T-34, a predator on the plains, became a clumsy bull in a slaughter chute. The air tasted of pulverized brick and ancient dust, a gray powder that coated our tongues and turned the sweat on our faces into mud. We were blind. We were deaf. We were waiting to die. The ambush did not start with a sound. It started with a pressure wave that punched the air out of my lungs. The turret rang like a church bell struck by a titan's hammer. The world inside the fighting compartment turned a violent, blinding white instantly replaced by absolute darkness. The smell hit me next, ozone, searing heat, and the copper tang of blood. "Report! Report!" I screamed, but my ears were ringing with a high, piercing whine. The interior lights were dead. Through the gloom, illuminated only by the sparks showering from the fuse box, I saw the commander. He wasn't moving. He was slumped over the breech of the main gun, his headset dangling by a wire. I reached out, my hand finding the wet slickness of his leather jacket. I pulled him back. He was heavy, dead white. His eyes were open, staring at the floor plates, glazed with the shock of the concussion. He was alive, but his mind was gone, rattled loose by the impact of a Panzerfaust rocket against the turret armor. "Reverse!" Reversing, Nikolai the driver was shrieking from the bowel of the tank. I could feel the transmission grinding as he tried to jam the gears backward. "No," I shouted, but the intercom was dead. If we reversed, we went back into the kill zone. The German hunter team was behind us, reloading. They had missed the ammunition rack by inches. The next shot would not miss. The next shot would cook us. This was the fear. This was the nightmare I had carried since Kursk. The steel walls were closing in. The smoke was thickening. Acrid rubber smoke that stung the eyes in panic, cold and sharp, rose in my throat. The hatch was right there. I could pop it. I could scramble out into the ruin. I could run. I was a farmer. I knew how to hide in the earth. But the engine roared, a confused beast trapped in a pit. Nikolai was blind, panicking, grinding the tracks against the curbs. The gunner was vomiting. Concussed, I looked at the commander's empty seat. The seat of authority. The seat of the man who told us when to live and when to die. It was empty. I was just a loader. I lifted heavy shells. I fixed broken tracks. I did not lead. But the smoke was filling the compartment, and in the darkness I saw the farm again. I saw the combine harvester stuck in the spring mud, the way my father would freeze, unable to see the solution, and how I would have to take the wheel, to feel the traction that he could not feel. I unbuckled. I shoved the commander's unconscious body onto the floor, his blood smearing my trousers. I climbed into the cupola. I jammed my eyes against the periscope. Green, blurry chaos. To the rear, smoke. To the front, the street was blocked by a fallen tram car. We were boxed. Orders. We're a coffin if we stay here. Nikolai's voice came through the hull, raw with terror. I grabbed the command override. My hand shook not from the cold, but from the transgression. I was seizing the soul of the tank. I looked through the prism again. To the right, a shop front, a bakery perhaps. The window was shattered, the brickwork crumbling. Beyond it, a courtyard. It wasn't a road. It was a wall. A tank commander sees a wall and sees a barrier. A farmer sees a wall and sees loose stone. It was brick, not granite. It was mortar, not steel. I gripped the microphone, my knuckles white, squeezing until the plastic creaked. I took a breath, inhaling the smoke, the fear, the smell of my friend's blood. I killed the farm boy in that breath. Driver hard right. My voice was strange, deep, scraping against the discord. Through the building. Now the tank lurched as Nikolai obeyed the voice of command, not knowing it was mine. The nose of the T-34 swung. We hit the wall. It didn't feel like a collision. It felt like an earthquake. The brickwork exploded. The tank groaned, a prehistoric scream of metal twisting against stone. Darkness swallowed us completely as the roof of the shop collapsed onto the turret. Dust flooded the compartment, choking us, solid and heavy. We were burying ourselves. Keep moving. Forward. Don't stop, I screamed, coughing up grit. The tracks bit into the floorboards of the shop, chewing through furniture and debris. The engine howled, straining against the weight of the falling building. We were the plow, and the city was the soil. We tore through the back wall, the tank bucking violently, and burst into the sunlight of the courtyard. We drifted to a halt. The dust began to settle. I spun the periscope to the rear. Through the hole we had just punched, I saw the German anti-tank team in the street, looking at the empty space where we had been, their weapons uselessly pointed at nothing. High explosive, I whispered. The gunner, shaken but awake, obeyed. He didn't ask who gave the order. He just fired. The shell passed through the ruin of the bakery and detonated in the street. The threat was gone. Silence returned to the inside of the tank. Not the silence of peace, but the ringing silence of survival. The commander groaned on the floor. Nikolai was weeping softly over the intercom. I sat in the commander's seat, my hands still gripping the mic, shaking uncontrollably. We were alive, but the boy who had climbed into the tank in Russia was dead. He had died in that smoke. 40 years later. The silence is different here. It is the silence of growing things. I wiped my hands on a rag, staining the cloth with black grease. The sun is hot on the back of my neck, a heavy, humid heat that promises rain for the wheat. The tractor sits in the yard, its engine cowling open. It is a red Belarus, a good machine. It has a padded seat. It has a radio that plays folk songs, not orders. It does not smell of cordite, but it smells of diesel. I am tightening the fuel injector line. The wrench slips, metal clanking against the block. A spark jumps. For a heartbeat, the sun goes out. The smell of the hot oil hits the back of my throat, and I am not standing in a field near Kursk. I am back in the stone gullet. The air is gray poison. The walls are closing in. I can hear Nikolai screaming. I can feel the weight of the commander's body against my legs. My chest tightens. a steel band crushing my ribs. The panic rises, that same cold, sharp liquid fear. I can't breathe. I am trapped in the burning iron coffin. I drop the wrench. It hits the dirt with a thud. I grip the tire of the tractor, the rubber hot under my palms. I force myself to look at the horizon. There are no ruins here. There is only the wheat, gold, and swang. There is the village, rebuilt. There are my grandchildren playing by the creek. I breathe in, out. The smoke clears. The ghost of the T-34 recedes, sinking back into the dark corners of my mind, waiting for the next smell of burning oil. The next sudden loud noise. They call us heroes. They put medals on our chests and talk about the glory of the great patriotic war. They do not talk about the dreams. They do not talk about how the machine never really lets you go. We drove those tanks to Berlin. We crushed the fascism under our tracks. But the tracks left marks on our souls that no rain can wash away. I look at the tractor. It is just a machine. It has no malice. It only does what the hands on the wheel tell it to do. That is the hard truth I found in the rubble of Berlin. A man can be a gear in a machine, turning when he is told. Or he can be the mechanic, the one who understands the engine, the one who knows how to stop it. We had to drive that terrible machine all the way to Berlin to break it. We broke it so you wouldn't have to. But I watch the news. I see the factories churning. I see the young men marching in straight lines, their eyes bright with the same lie we were told. They are polishing the gears again. My lesson, my hope for you is this. Learn to be the mechanic. Learn to fix this world before the engine of war starts again. My harvest was ruined a long time ago, so yours could grow. Do not let the weeds return. This memory is a shard of glass I carry. Help me pull it out. Subscribe to keep this history alive.